Hello, I am Nicole Solis, and I am thrilled to share my thesis defense presentation as part of my candidacy for the Master of Arts in History under the guidance of my thesis director, Dr. Mark Edwards at Liberty University. My thesis is titled Becoming James Madison, the Spiritual Education of a Founding Father, and it represents a segment of a broader project that will ultimately lead to an argumentative spiritual biography of James Madison. James Madison is frequently referred to as the father of the Constitution. But what really led him to earn that title? I believe that the intersection of popular Enlightenment ideas and evangelical dissent in colonial Virginia significantly influenced Madison's early development. This contrast is reflected in the individuals who impacted Madison, those who were shaped by historical developments like the rise of the evangelical revivals and the dissemination of Enlightenment principles. The early biographies of James Madison came into existence. I've identified notable gaps in the existing literature. While these biographers focused on his political philosophy, they tend to neglect young Madison's profound religious and intellectual upbringing. This oversight regarding Virginia's educational and spiritual culture has resulted in a misrepresentation and oversimplification of a complex and relatable man from Virginia, born during the tumultuous colonial landscape of the mid 18th century. Starting in the mid 19th century, early biographers like William Cable Rives and Sidney Howard Gay revered Madison as a representation of the patriotic spirit of the Revolution. Although efforts began with Gaylord Hunt in 1902 to portray Madison in a more human light through his newly published writings and letters, these attempts were somewhat limited due to Madison's elusive personality. By the mid 20th century, Irving Brandt embarked on a monumental 20-year project culminating in a 6-volume biography of Madison's life. While Brandt criticized early historians for dehumanizing Madison, his focus on reason over emotion tended to stereotype Madison as a dispassionate intellectual. In recent decades, researchers have cautiously examined the beliefs of the founding fathers. But since these studies were not formal biographies of Madison, they shifted attention away from his early education and centered more on his time at Princeton under the guidance of Scots Irish Presbyterian John Witherspoon. This ongoing abstraction, with limited insight into Madison's intellectual and spiritual growth, restricted the understanding of his character. However, 21st century historians have paved the way for more nuanced perspectives, void of a Madison known as the detached, moderate system builder. Natalie Karen and Naomi Wolf confronted the binary distinction between Enlightenment rationalism and evangelical religion in early America through their historiographical essay, which emphasizes the revival of Enlightenment studies. They highlighted the significance of viewing early American thought as a blend of rationalism, religion, mysticism, and political ideology. Their work reinforced the notion that comprehensive understanding of the American Enlightenment must incorporate essential religious aspects. Chapter 1 presents my thesis, incorporating a historiography of the Great Awakening in Virginia alongside insights from the biographers of James Madison. The methodology utilizes a contextual rhetorical criticism approach, highlighting the interaction between religious, philosophical, and political rhetoric in Madison's early writings, particularly those created before and during his time at Princeton. Chapter 2, titled James Madison's Virginia, examines the religious and intellectual landscape of Virginia and explores how Madison's family background shaped his early perspectives on authority, liberty, and conscience. The methodological approach will focus on rhetoric from leaders of both the Enlightenment and the Great Awakening as chief causes of Virginia's diverse nature. In Chapter 3, I emphasize how Madison's education through evangelical tutors and an Enlightenment curriculum contributed to the development of his foundational values and beliefs. The rhetoric encapsulated in popular print culture of the era emphasizes the dichotomy infused within Madison's education. The final chapter, James Madison's collegiate life, discusses Madison's decision to attend Princeton instead of the College of William and Mary, influenced by Reverend Thomas Martin. This chapter also underscores the significant impact of the deeply religious Scots-Irish Enlightenment and its effect on his views regarding Protestant dissent and vocational aspirations. It is in this chapter that readers will be introduced to the culmination of Madison's edifying rhetorical influences within his letters and personal writings. My thesis focused on three key arguments, the first being the converging traditions in Virginia. I will prove that from its inception, the Virginia colony was marked by religious and political turmoil. This environment, coupled with the Madison's complex relationship with the establishment, became a pluralistic playground for young James, where religious dissent and revolutionary ideals offered a space to probe, question, and construct a vision of liberty rooted in both moral conviction and rational design. My second main point explores Madison's formative education leading up to his time at Princeton, a period shaped by his deep engagement with the rhetoric of imperial conflict, religious diversity, and societal transformation. Surrounded by a library of sermons, histories, and philosophical treatises, Madison turned the pages between reason and revelation, absorbing the tensions between spiritual authority and political power. This intellectual environment taught him that religious liberty was no abstract ideal. It was continually threatened by the will of majority and prevailing orthodoxies. I will demonstrate that this context enabled Madison to embrace both Enlightenment rationalism and evangelical urgency, recognizing that tyranny could imperil the soul as surely as it could the state. My third point examines Madison's emergence as a man of conscience, one who did more than absorb the ideals of liberty and belief. He tested them. In his early years, Madison annotated the world around him with quiet wit and growing moral skepticism, tracing the contradictions between spiritual rhetoric and political authority. Yet his time just prior to and at Princeton, under the intellectual guidance of Scots Irish Presbyterian tutors like Thomas Martin and the philosophical rigor of John Witherspoon, that Madison's mind matured beyond recitation. Immersed in a curriculum shaped by Enlightenment logic and theological dissent, he became not only a reader of ideas, but a discerning critic, one capable of interrogating both evangelical and Enlightenment voices. I will argue that these influences forged a character grounded in discipline and moral reasoning, where conscience and critique walked hand in hand. Historians often trace the roots of Madison's commitment to religious liberty to his time in Virginia following his graduation at Princeton. However, I aim to challenge these prevailing hypotheses by demonstrating that Madison's upbringing in Virginia, a colony that seamlessly melded religious fervor with Enlightenment reasoning, established an inevitable trajectory for him to develop a principled philosophy of liberty grounded in both moral conviction and rational dissent. This reframing invites historians to reconsider how they visualize the intellectual and moral formation of the founders as catalytic forces behind their later constitutional ideals. My thesis aims to shed light on overlooked intellectual influences, situate Madison within his unique cultural landscape, and offer a framework for integrated intellectual history. In conclusion, utilizing a contextual rhetorical criticism methodology, this study unveils how Madison's early encounters with dissenting Protestant ideals, classical education, and Enlightenment philosophy shaped his evolving understanding of religious freedom, personal responsibility, and civic duty. Thank you so much for your time spent listening to my thesis defense, Becoming James Madison, the Spiritual Education of a Founding Father. I am happy to take any questions at any time. Thank you.